I want to say we'd like to dedicate this show to the late Jim Scholl, who was an amazing man. He founded Project Adventure in Gloucester, and there are some Project Adventure graduates, my brother being one of them, Jimmy Tarantino being another, in this room right now. He went all over the world teaching experiential learning, and the rivers and rocks and beaches of Cape Ann were his classroom. So just an amazing guy. Mr. Adventure, as I call him. All right, so we're going to get started, but first, thank you for coming. Thank you in the YouTube audience. And the best part of putting this thing together, being asked to help organize it, was meeting these amazing people that you're about to hear. So let's get on with it. First, I want to introduce Laurie Fleming. Meeting her was so fun. Hi, Candy. That's an in-house joke. I want to say she's a team player, but also a team builder. And wherever she goes, whether it's on the high seas or on a reformer platform, she is a wanted woman. Laurie.
I ran into Jimmy Tarantino about a month ago in Second Glance. And I said, hey, Jimmy, I'm glad I ran into you. I'm going to do the fishtails, and I'm really nervous. And he said, Laurie, don't sweat it. He goes, just go tell your story and have fun. People are going to love you. Don't worry about it. And then he turned and walked away, and as he was walking away, he puffed his chest out and said, you just better hope you don't go before me or after me. So I'm first, and he's last, so whoever worked that out, thank you. My story starts in about 1985, when my best friend Candy Roberts and our best friend Beverly Graham were out on our run, and we saw a sign on a telephone pole that said, women wanted. So we thought, well, they're going to want us, whatever it is, as long as it wasn't a Tupperware party or something. So turns out it was for an international seamanship event that was to take place the following year in New York City, and then again in France, a rematch in France 2 years later. So we gathered a few people, created a team. Now, the boat that we would be using in this event was just built in Maine and was tied up in Hull. We would have to learn to row her, sail it, do a lashed rudder course, tug of war, oh gosh, I'm losing it, and learn a bunch of knots. It was a whole seamanship thing. So we start our training. Now, in Gloucester, there were no boats for us to train in. We had about 10 women who were interested in this. There were no boats to train in except dories. Women were not anywhere near allowed near the same boats at the time. So we got into dories. And now a dory is meant for one, no more than two people. But we crammed 4 people in a dory, shoulder to shoulder. We could hardly move the oars, but we needed to learn how to row a boat. I'd never done it. So we quickly grew out of the dories and ended up driving to Hull 3 or 4 nights a week to train in the gig, which is this gig. Thank you, Laurel, for the T-shirt. And so we did our training in Hull. We did our training at home. My husband at the time taught us how to tie a bunch of knots. And the training's going well, but now we needed money to get to New York. So we decided we would do a fundraising row from Boston to Gloucester, which is 30 miles. We picked a day in June, thinking it would be nice. We showed up, some of you know, we showed up on a Saturday morning at Boston Coast Guard Station and boarded the gig on a drizzly day that was 50 degrees out. So we were already in it, but we were excited. We trained for this and we were ready, and we were tough. So the row out of the harbor, it's about 6 miles out of Boston Harbor, was quite nice, actually. We were protected. And if you've ever rowed in a boat with multi-oars, there's a sound that the oars make when they're hitting the gunnels all at the same time. It's like music. It's like a meditation. And we had that all the way out the harbor until we hooked a left to head to Gloucester. And we were assaulted with now, the rain started to driving rain. It was foggy. There were 2 to 3 foot seas and a northeast wind of 15 to 20 knots. Now, we knew now what we were up against, however long this was going to take, but the team was pretty excited. We were tough. Now, a lot of things can go wrong in those conditions. A lot of things did go wrong in those conditions. One of them was the oar was 13 feet, made of mahogany, weighed 25 pounds. And it was really made for a man's grip, man's hand size. So with the rain, trying to grip those oars and keep them with the wind and the rain, it was really hard to hold the oars. So the blisters happened pretty quick. It was really tough. Another thing that can go really wrong is when an oar doesn't hit the water at the proper angle, it's called catching a crab. And so now the oar dives down 2 feet, and while you're trying to wrestle, the handle's up here now, and the oar's down there, and you're trying to wrestle it back to level, you've already taken out 2 oars in front of you. So there was a lot of that going on. We were recovering the whole time. Another thing that goes wrong is when you're up on a wave, and you put all your might and your weight into that next stroke, but there's no water under the oar, now you're stroking air, and so you land in the boat, into the knees of the person behind you. Constantly happening. Now, so we're going along on this. We did have 2 extra rowers in the boat. When about every hour we would switch off to get a rest. But there was no rest on this row because when we were not rowing, we were in the stern bailing so that we're not standing in water up to our ankles. It was the hardest thing I think I probably have ever done. We did have Beverly Graham, God love her. She was a sweep oar. She was steering us. So you could have the 10 best rowers on the planet, but if you didn't have someone capable steering the boat, it wouldn't make much difference. We did have Donnie King, my husband at the time. Did I already say that? I've had a few husbands. He was our support boat. So he was alongside us. He had to go ahead of us because of the fog. We didn't have anything to navigate, so he was ahead of us. And we're rowing along. It's really, really tough. And at one point, he came up to us. The tide had changed now. So now we're heading against the tide and the wind and the rain. And he said, "You guys, you haven't moved the boat in an hour. You're in place." And we're like, "Oh, just let us row." And he said, "At this rate, you won't get into the St. Peter's Square until 10 o'clock tonight. You got to take a tow." And we didn't want to take the tow, but it was a safety thing. So we agreed to take the tow after we voted, reluctantly took the tow. And right around Marblehead Harbor, now we're freezing in the boat. We're just sitting there in the boat. We didn't have Lululemon at that time. We were in T-shirts and tights. So we get around Marblehead and we're begging him, let us row. We need to warm up and we want to do this thing. So he finally cut us loose around Marblehead Harbor, probably 11 miles to get into Gloucester. And we're rowing along, we're trudging through it. And then Bev yells from the stern, "I see the breakwater." So now we've had like, holy shit, we did this. We're almost home. And we get past the breakwater. It was amazing. We cheered. And then we're coming in. We know we're home. It's probably another hour from the breakwater to get into St. Peter's Square. And we get around the paint factory. And our beautiful Marilyn Monroe of our team, Leone Stewart, God rest her soul, she calls ship oars. And when someone yells ship oars on a boat, you throw the oars across the rails because you don't know what's going on yet. And then she calmly pulls her lipstick out of her pocket and swear to God, and reapplies a fresh coat of her red lipstick. Puts it back in, we gave a cheer, and we rode in to a huge crowd waiting for us. They were waiting in the rain for us. The paper was there, everything was there. We raised $3,000 that day. Now, there was a guys' team who took the boat back the next day. It was 70 degrees, flat calm. Just saying. Okay, so now New York was the next month. We went to New York. This was an international event. We came in second place out of 11 countries. Yeah, right? Thank you. We get home from New York and realize we need to get ready for France, which was 2 years away. So we hired Larry Delmar to build us our own boat so that we wouldn't have to drive into Hull all the time. And Larry built us a Silly Owl gig, which some of you probably know as the Siren Song. And we had that built. So then we had the boat to train in. We go to France. France was amazing, the best experience I think I've ever had. I mean, I, at that age, hadn't really been much past puberty. So going to New York and France was a big deal for me. So now we get home from France and we're not done with this. We were kind of let down. We wanted more of this thing, and we had built a little reputation. My friend Gina Lampassi, who was on the team, and I said, you know what, why can't we do this international dory thing that all the guys do? So we commissioned their committee, and they reluctantly let us row in Canada as an unsanctioned race. Which they didn't count, but we rowed in Canada, and now women row in the international dories every single year. Lots of teams. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you. So we still weren't done, and there was a lot of women. We're getting a lot of attention now, and there were other women saying, I want some of that. So then we commissioned the seine boat, St. Peter's Fiesta seine boat. Now those boats are only for men. But we wanted to prove that we could row their course, a mile course, in their boats. We asked them if we could row them. We knew we would lose, but we wanted to show them that we could row the boats. And today, you guys, there are sometimes more women's teams in the St. Peter's Fiesta seine boat races than there are men. So, just please, if you ever see a sign on a telephone pole, just read it, because you just don't know if it could change your life.
Our next storyteller is Jeff Crawford, who is literally in the adventure business. He is the successor to Jim Scholes, and I am jealous. Give a warm welcome to Jeff Crawford.
Okay, November 1995. In Hong Kong. My wife and I, Joanne, are relaxing in Hong Kong, and we're getting ready for a really big adventure. We're going to go trekking in Nepal, and basically trekking in Nepal to the Khumbu region, which is near Mount Everest. And that was, we had been preparing, getting the right shoes, the right backpacks, all the right gear. We get to Kathmandu, and as we get to Kathmandu, we find out there's a massive storm that happened up in the Khumbu region. They had to rescue 546 people. 61 people died from avalanches. And we have a big decision to make. Are we going to go? Being New Englanders, we figured, big snowstorm. We're going to be there in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. By that time, they'll probably have it worked out. So we hired a Sherpa, we hired a car, we took the road trip as far as we could go to a little town called Jiri, which is right near the Tibetan border. At that point, we're hitting the trail. After that point, there are no roads. It's just trails. And the trails are similar if you've ever been out to Dogtown, the Dogtown Road. the trail, that's similar, except for the whole population goes along these trails. So we head out on our first day, and about a half a day into it, we realized, oh my God, we cannot carry all of our gear. So we had our Sherpa, if he could find a porter to go with us. And he was able, a lot of people turned him down, but he was able to find a porter that would take up most of our equipment, lighten our load. We still carried our backpacks. And he basically was within a half a day of 2 weeks on the trail getting home. And at that point, he turned around and went back with us. And we headed out the trail, heading up to the Khumbu. And we would stay in a tea house overnight. And a tea house is kind of like a very rustic version of a B&B. They would give you food. You had a place to sleep, generally no heat. We started about 6,000 feet elevation. We would go about 12,000 feet in the day and back down to about 6,000 feet. And that was a typical day, about 8 hours of trekking. And I will say, I thought I knew how to walk. But I started realizing that these professionals, the porters, were the real professional walkers. They're basically human trucks. They deliver everything to everybody out there. And one of the things that always amazed me, and we'd be way up in the mountains, and you would buy a Coca-Cola in a glass bottle, and it was wonderful. Out there it was. But then you would think that glass bottle went on a porter's back to the city, got refilled, and a porter brought that back up so that you could have your Coca-Cola out there in the mountains. So anyway, about a week and a half into this, we ended up in the town of Namche, or village of Namche Bazaar. Namche Bazaar is where everybody goes through to climb Mount Washington. So it's fairly popular. Oh, sorry. Mount Everest, yes. So anyway, we finally get there about a week and a half in. We're dragging butt here. We are getting in shape, but still, we've been a week and a half on the trail. We get into our tea house. Somebody said, they've got cappuccino across the street. Now, I mean, when I see street, it's just a dirt trail up through the town. We're like, oh, let's go check it out. So we go over. We had cappuccino, and I'm not sure if it was our condition or the fact that we're up in the middle of the Khumbu region in Nepal, but that was the best cappuccino I've ever had. And we had to know, how on earth did this thing get here? So we went and we kind of tracked down the owner, who was sitting at a sewing machine making little wallets. And we asked him, and he actually spoke good English. So we're like, oh, this is great. We'll talk to him and ask him a few questions. He actually said, well, where are you from? And we said, well, we're from the United States. He said, where? In Massachusetts. He said to us, have you ever heard of Essex? And we're like, yeah, we know Essex well. It's right next to our town. He goes there almost every summer and lives with a man named Mark Ritchie, who somebody might know who he is. He's kind of a big-time mountain climber. And he would come over every year and buy climbing gear and bring it back to his town, Namche Bazaar. And since then, we've had him as a guest here in Gloucester, and we've seen him a few times, almost every year for a few years. It was great seeing him. So after Namche, we kept on heading up towards, our goal was to get up near the Everest Base Camp. And the elevation of Namche is around 12,000, I think, and we keep heading up. And we finally got to the little village of, it's a very little village, of Gorachep at 17,000 feet. And the next day, we got out early because we were going to head up to near the base camp, which is it's nothing special to see, but seeing the mountain was a spectacular thing. But a couple hours in, we started getting elevation sickness. And it's hard to explain what that is. I think it's sort of the cousin to seasickness. You know, that feeling that you don't feel good at all. And that's what we had. And our Sherpa guide also had it. And if he had it, it's like, wait a minute. So we stopped and we took a break, and we were sitting on the edge of what they call the Khumbu ice glacier, ice field, down below it anyway. And we started thinking that maybe we have gone a little too far in our travels. We were so uncomfortable. And we actually, up there, thought, you know, having a family can't be any more difficult than this. And that's when we decided that, yeah, let's go back and we'll get a family going. We had just enough time to get down to 16,000 feet, that the next village, and we ended up getting our way back. And these experiences have been really great because of what I do here on Cape Ann, the Gloucester Adventure Camp, because we're out in the trails and we're all through nature. And a lot of this experience, again, learning how to walk was pretty great. And so we came back, and what can I say? We had a child, and we named him Everest.
When I heard about this next story, I was really proud. And then when I learned more and more about it, I was proud of all of Cape Ann. And you'll find out why right now. Give a warm welcome to Buddy Doucette.
Hi. I'd like to start with a quote from Mark Twain. The two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. So my birthday's November 15th, 1969, and my story takes place May 18th, 2025. My day started off with me working on my son's boat down at St. Peter's commercial dock with a good friend of mine and colleague, Fire Chief Andy McRobb. We weren't working on the boat for more than probably 15 minutes when all of a sudden we heard this god-awful tire screech. And we were on the back of the boat, and we turned and looked, and we were like, what the hell's going on? And there was like a little pause and then an explosion, like crash. And as we looked, I saw a 1.5-foot piece of granite go flying off this wall, followed by a 4-door sedan. And the car followed it right over, flipped over, and landed in the water. Now, the two of us were like, holy shit. I mean, you know, we just witnessed this. And I don't remember jumping off the back of the boat. I don't remember running to the end of the pier. It was about 120 feet away. I just remember my buddy Andy saying, I'll call the station, the fire department. That's all I knew. When I got down to the edge of the dock, there was a Mark Lodge and his son, Chris Lodge. They were loading lobster traps on their lobster boat right at the town landing float. Now, these two had a bird's eye view of this car coming at them, flipping over. So they were pretty worked up when I got there. So when I got to the edge of the dock, the cars flipped over, pretty much underwater. And then Mark looks at me and says, I have a sledgehammer and I have the little red knife, a lobsterman's knife. There was no question of what I was doing. I jumped right in the water. I got in the water, I went over, I grabbed the maul and the knife from Mark. As soon as I grabbed that, Chris Lodge, his son, jumped in the water and went around the front of the car to the driver's side. The car at that time was flipped over, and I had the front passenger and the rear passenger. And I waded over to the door, I hit the window broke, I was able to reach in. Luckily the door wasn't locked, the door opened up. When the door opened up, the first victim was seatbelted upside down underwater. So I screamed in and says, hey, I'm coming in with a knife in case they somehow flail, because it's a sharp knife. And I cut the seatbelt. Once I cut the seatbelt, the victim fell out and come up from under the water. It was a woman, and she was bleeding from the head. Now, in my mind, I didn't care what other injuries she had. To me, it was they needed to breathe. They're not going to drown. I knew that, and at this time, there's all these other people that were in the area start coming down. So I knew once I floated her off, as long as they keep her head above water, I don't give a crap. I know help is coming. I then go to the next passenger. I open up the rear door, and then I have another woman come out, and she's as gray as a ghost. I mean, she comes out like a wet cat, and I gaff her, and now I go over to the other pier and pass it off to other bystanders. Now, you got to remember, by now, when this first started, the 911 system was activated. Deputy chief called the fire department. All you could hear is the whole city alive with sirens. I could hear police cruisers from all different parts of the city, from East Gloucester, they all coming in, and then I could hear the fire trucks all coming. I mean, I'm sitting there going, oh, there's engine one, there's a lot of truck. You know, it's all coming in, and I knew help was on the way. But in the meantime, Chris Lodge and the owner of the Tarno restaurant, I believe Anthony Catarano, he scaled down the wall and was helping Chris, and they were trying to get the driver out. But the problem was the door was getting jammed up in the mud and the rocks. And they were able to open it up enough and finally cut the seatbelt to get her head above water at least, so she was breathing. And I just remember looking over, and there were so many people that were down there willing to help. Like the second victim that I took out, there was a woman that stayed by her side the whole time, you know, and never left. And in the meantime, I look up, and now the fire department's showing up. They're coming with all their equipment. And I'm telling Andy, I said, the deputy chief, I says, Andy, tell them to bring scoop stretchers, because these women had no strength to get out of the water. Because you have to remember, they were involved in a traumatic car accident even before they went off the wall. You know, right? Because I believe they had a broken rib, broken hip, and stuff. But again, to me, I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted them to breathe. That was the main objective. Now, people ask me when I jumped in, yeah, the water was cold, didn't feel it, right? I jumped in, I lost one shoe in the mud, didn't care about it, you know, or whatever. And finally, when everybody was able to either be put on backboards and hauled out of the water, the one thing that I got that every woman is going to want when they leave that scene is, what do you think? Exactly. I got 3. I made sure I had 3 purses or pocketbooks. I won't tell you their ages, but there was a couple pocketbooks, so you probably know how old they were. But I got the pocketbooks and went up there, and I just remember after the whole scene, hauling my ass out of the water and looking at it, and I'm hobbling because I got a shoe missing, and I'm all wet, and then I go, it's a good thing my phone's in the boat. I went, oh shit. So my phone, my wallet, I had to get a new phone, but I ended up walking up the end of the pier, and the mayor was there, and I just wanted to let him know. I says, you should be very proud of the community, because everybody there stepped up right away and was so compassionate to these 3 women. And it made me very proud. And, you know, I hope I never have to do it again, you know. But I was glad. I mean, when I said in my news interview, right place, right time, and I will say this, the 5 of us, Mark Lodge, Chris Lodge, Mr. Catarano, and myself. That rescue took 30 seconds to have them out. And I'm not, this is what it was told by the people that witnessed. They said within 30 seconds. And I thought about it, and even my deputy chief said, even if the personnel at headquarters in the fire trucks were waiting for that call and says, you can respond now, these women would have drowned. From the time it took to get from School Street down to the car, they would have been gone. Because every one of them come out, they never said a word to me because they were all in shock. They were all spitting up salt water. And it was just a surreal scene. But again, I was never so proud of the community and everybody that was involved with it. So, thank you.
Okay, the next storyteller looks so much like me, it is very, very odd. My identical twin brother is in the audience here. He's not telling a story, I just wanted to give him a shock. I'm telling the next story, and I look a lot like me. All right, so statistically speaking, parachuting is a very safe activity. All right, don't get ahead of me. So I'm laying flat out in a hospital bed in enormous pain with a doctor looming over me. And what had happened was I was in an Army training program where we parachute, and we were running 2 lines of guys out the back door of a C-141 jet. And at the back of that jet, the doors are very close together. So when everybody's running out, there is a higher risk of entanglement, but you got to practice it once in a while. So we did. I get out, I'm in the sky, and immediately there's a guy tangled up in my parachute just about out of arm's reach. Now that's a bad thing. That's not something you want to see. Now it's extremely quiet in the sky. It's even weird. So I'm talking to this guy normally, and his name was Kevin also. So I say, Kevin, my chute's still fully inflated. We're going to ride it in. And so we agreed to do that while I tried to get him out of his predicament. He was kind of like this, caught in my stuff. So the reason we're trying to, nobody's going to throw a reserve parachute and screw up the one inflated chute that we have. So as we're coming down, I looked down at the ground, and the ground was coming up like a movie sped up. And I went, so I probably said something else. And I yelled out, prepare to land, because that's the command that we all use to make everybody know they have to assume a certain position so that you can roll out of it, hopefully without too much trouble. So I go like this, and we slammed into the ground. Now, people on the ground said that my chute collapsed 40 feet above the ground. So I don't know if that's true, but it sure felt like it. The other guy broke his back and was out of the Army that day. I went to the hospital, and here I am with this doctor. And he's got a nurse, some kind of a training nurse. So he's poking and prodding me, and he brings the nurse in. He says, come here, this is one of those guys I was telling you about. And then he starts talking about me like I'm not there. Like I'm deaf grandpa at the dinner table. He looks at me and goes, do you want to go back to training? Now, we got the instructor there in the room with me, and these guys are demigods to us. So I would have had to say yes if I had 2 broken legs. So I go, yes. And he goes, see? Then he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you can do a sit-up, I'll let you leave this hospital. And I had, as you may just have had, some very unkind and unchristian thoughts about this guy. Thoughts I still harbor to this day. So I did that sit-up. I made some noises I haven't heard before or since. I get back to the barracks, and now I'm laying out on a bare mattress with no pillow, but I was euphoric. Not just because the pain meds had started to kick in, but because I was going to get some real sleep. This was one of those schools that involved a lot of food and sleep deprivation. So I'm thinking, I'm going to get drunk on sleep. I'm going to get 12 hours, 16 hours. Nobody's going to bother me. And at that moment, one of the instructors comes in and says, grab your shit, the command sergeant major wants to see you outside. I was like, oh my God, I'm in trouble on top of everything else? I go outside, he's there in a Jeep. It's one of those old-time World War II Jeeps, which were still in circulation at the time. They're very small, but the back seat was fully taken up with 2 parachutes. I went, uh-oh. So we drive to an airfield. There's a helicopter already warmed up. We strap on the chutes. We get in, and we parachute into the class that I had just left. Now, these guys were all in a big circle because of what they were doing in the training exercise at the time. And as I'm coming down, they recognize, oh, it's old Perrin's returning to us. So they all started cheering and clapping. And so I drove on. I guess that was some kind of tough love, but it worked because I stayed in that program. I stayed in the Army for another 33 years through 2 more parachute accidents, 2 more. And I think what did it was not just the tough love, but the idea of floating down from the sky into all of your friends while they clap and cheer for you. It's wonderful. You ought to try it sometime. This next storyteller is Wendy Booker. Now, she has literally already conquered the world, and she's not done yet. We've had that conversation. Please give a warm welcome to Wendy Booker.
Well, how does someone who'd never slept in a sleeping bag, never went camping, never slept in a tent, had to be 20 feet from a luxurious bathroom, end up on the world's highest mountains? I think the short answer is you open your big mouth, and you'll hear that in a minute. But I'm always amazed by how far 26.2 miles has taken me. That's the distance of a marathon, but in my case, it became the distance of a lifetime. And I sincerely doubt I would ever have taken on running the Boston Marathon had I not been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, before you start thinking that I'm some kind of athlete, I want to point out that when I run these marathons, I see 20,000 rear ends, and the view never changes. So I'm a plotter, and that's how I've done everything. And over the years, I've come to define myself by what I call my 3 S's. And that's serendipity, self-discovery, and a whole lot of stubbornness. Because most of what I've done has been defying medical wisdom and being told I couldn't, shouldn't, or wouldn't, or people with MS can't do that. And I kept thinking, well, what difference does it make if I end up in a wheelchair from the marathon or from MS? The outcome is going to be the same. So that's why I went and persevered. Well, after I ran that very first Boston Marathon, I was invited to speak at the American Neurological Convention. 1,800 neurologists, a very difficult audience, by the way. Anyway, after I was done speaking, I was invited out to dinner to a very fancy restaurant, big round table, and it was the who's who of MS at this dinner. There were researchers, there were doctors, there were people from the pharmaceutical company, there were public relations, and Alan Osmond, Donny Osmond's brother. Now, all these doctors are talking about mice models and T1 cells and blood-brain barriers, and I fixated on Alan Osmond. How many kids do you have? How do you guys do Christmas? Now, I know these doctors are thinking, who invited the dits? I missed all that. Well, finally the conversation came around to mountain climbing. And someone at the table asked me if I'd ever climbed, and I proudly named off 2 mountains in New Hampshire that I now know to be foothills. I said, I've climbed. The woman to my left, who was the head of a major major public relations company, said, well, we've had an opportunity come up. There's a gentleman from Boulder, Colorado with MS, and he's looking to put the first team of climbers unguided with MS on Denali. Now, Denali, doesn't that sound hot and tropical? I'm thinking pina coladas. I think it must be in Hawaii. And I was so arrogant. I'm thinking, I just ran the Boston Marathon. How hard can a mountain named Denali be? I said, I'm your woman. Well, the dinner ended. I didn't hear anything more about it, and my curiosity was killing me. So after about 3 weeks, I called this woman back. And I said, hey, that mountain you mentioned, where is it? She said, Alaska. So my first thought is, damn, it's going to be really cold. I said, well, that's funny. The only mountain I've ever heard of in Alaska is McKinley. Same mountain. I said, oh, wait a minute. You know those two I mentioned at dinner? I think I was 10, and I don't even think I got to the top. I said, you're talking, I didn't even know how to put words. I had no idea what I was talking about. She said, well, if you're interested, we'll train you, and you have 6 months to make up your mind. I needed every minute of that 6 months, and I got my hands on anything and everything I could read about Denali. And the first book I got was aptly titled Surviving Denali. The book is broken down into chapters according to the death and mayhem on the mountain. Cerebral edema, pulmonary edema, crevasse falls, frostbite. What's interesting is at the end of every chapter there's a chart, and the chart lists the climber's name, what country he came from, what happened to him, where it happened to him, and how much it cost the federal government to remove his body from the mountain. I read a lot that summer, and I started to drive people crazy because I was asking everybody if I should get involved, and usually the definitive answer was no. But there were 3 reasons I had to get involved. First of all, it would never be offered to me again. I knew if I turned it down, I wasn't going to get a second do-over or a chance. So that was one. The second reason is I wanted to see if I had what it takes to climb a major mountain like Denali. And the third was really compelling to me, and that was to show the world what people with MS are capable of and to encourage the newly diagnosed to get on one of the brand new therapies to manage their MS. And with those 3 in mind, I decided I was going to become the only woman climber on MS Don Denali 2002. Now, we didn't reach the summit, and everybody who climbs the big peaks will tell you it's the weather because who's going to check? The real reason was that one word that I didn't know meant what it meant. We did it unguided. That is the most foolhardy and stupid thing I've ever done in my life. Climbing a major peak like Denali without a guide is akin to playing Russian roulette with a loaded gun. We had no right to be on that mountain. We should have had a guide. Having 7 people with MS at one time having attacks right and left, it was made to fail. Well, I came back and I was furious. I had taken 2 years to learn how to climb. I spent 2 winters climbing Mount Washington. I flew out to Washington State to learn how to fall in crevasses on Rainier. I had to become a technical climber, which starts by learning how to climb rock and manipulating the ropes and learning how to put in the protection, and your hands are still warm. But then you have to transfer all that to putting on great big layers of gloves and mittens and still be able to put in the protection. I had to learn how to fall in a crevasse. I had to learn how to set up a pulley system to pull people out of a crevasse and what it means to be tied to the climber in front of you, which is all part of the experience. So I was angry that our team fell apart. And so I went back to the pharmaceutical company and I said, I need to go back. And they said, no. They said, we're in the business of saving lives, not killing people on Denali. And I said, well, you don't understand. This has nothing to do about the mountain. It has everything to do with multiple sclerosis. We can't always get to the top. We have to try a little harder, take a little longer, and dig a little deeper. And I got them to say yes. And while I had them in that very vulnerable spot, I decided I wasn't done asking, and I asked for the 7 summits, the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. And in 2004, I returned to Denali and became the first person with multiple sclerosis to reach the summit. Now, I carry 3 things with me to the top of the mountain. People always want to know. I carry a Buddha. My oldest son gave me a Buddha. I'm not Buddhist, but at that moment you want everything on your side, so Buddha goes in my pocket. I also carry a flag that's been signed by the inner city school kids of the East Boston Donald McKay. I've been working with those school children for 16 years. I take them all up Mount Monadnock every June, and they have signed a flag that says, come climb with me. And that flag really represents the challenge all of us face and all of our mountains. And the third thing I take are a man's ashes. John Reed died of cancer. He was a professor at Hampshire College, and you may know his widow, Lee Strong. And Lee had asked me if I would take John's ashes up to Denali. Well, once I found out I was doing the 7 summits, we took John's ashes and we divided him into 7 envelopes. Then there were a couple mountains I repeated. Anyway, there's not much of John left, but John has gone with me to the 7 summits and beyond. Well, it finally came time after I did 6 of the 7 to face Everest. We saved it for the last. And I went to Everest in 2008 to train, and I was supposed to climb a mountain called Cho-Oyu, which was in Tibet. And you have a better chance on Everest by doing Cho-Oyu. Well, that was the year of the Summer Olympics, and the Chinese, it was going to be in Beijing, and the Chinese closed down the country. They wouldn't allow climbing. They wouldn't allow us in Tibet. They didn't want Sherpas. It got very political. So I didn't. So I missed out on that opportunity, and I went to climb Everest in 2009. I hated it. I can't tell you a good thing about Everest. I was listening to Jeff, though, and I will tell you something funny. I know the same Sherpa. His name is Saddam. And he has stayed at my house. But anyway, I went to Everest, and I got to 23,000 feet on the Lhotse face, and my MS symptoms became intolerable. How ironic that the thing that got me there was now what took me away. I realized you start to play that armchair quarterback, like, should I go on? Maybe it's good. Maybe I'm being a wimp. Maybe I'm giving up. But the cost is so high that my decision would affect my Sherpa, would affect others, saving me, bringing me down. And so I turned back. Well, I went again in 2010, and I think I made a mistake. I think I went too soon. I should have put more distance between it. The exact same thing happened. At 23,000 feet, I could no longer continue. And it was found out by the doctors that the reason I couldn't go on was the prolonged lack of oxygen to the brain, and MS is a disease of the central nervous system. I couldn't do it, not enough air. Well, I came back, and one thing that happens to all of us when we find out we have MS, and it did to me when I was much younger and just had learned, is you become immobilized. You hear you have MS, and you don't know what to do. So you curl up in a ball, you watch TV, and you eat bonbons. You can't do anything because you're afraid. You don't want to look to the past because now you're mourning what you think you've lost. You don't want to look to the future because it's frighteningly unpredictable. So you stay in that pity party, that fetal position on the couch. Well, as soon as I came back from Everest, that's the first thing I did. I felt miserably sorry for myself, and I realized this is a lofty goal, but it was mine, and I had been working on it for over 10 years, and I had sacrificed a great deal. And what's the one thing that got me there took me off that mountain. But I started to think, what is Everest? Well, it's the top of the world, right? But it's not the only top. And in 2011, I took a dog sled team to the North Pole. The geographical top of the world. And my message has become one of set yourself a goal. Don't give up on your goal, but sometimes you have to change how you get there. And the view from the top is incredible. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. The next storyteller is Joe Sanfilippo. Now, I met him when he was giving a presentation on how to prepare the Feast of the Seven Fishes, and during it, he was talking about fishing out of Gloucester. That is the true, long-lasting heart of adventure for Cape Ann, is fishing. And I said, you know what? This guy is the real deal, no kidding, Gloucester fisherman. Here he is, Joe Sanfilippo.
Thank you. Well, I'm a Gloucesterman. How did I get here? It started in humble beginnings in Porticello, Sicily. My dad in the field with his clan, the Fuzzelladas, which quite simply put is the bean pickers. He wasn't too fond of that title considering he was a commercial fisherman, but the seasonality brought him there to that point. Not being happy, he said to his dad one day, he says, "Dad, someday when I find 5 liras in a suitcase, you won't see me here no more, you'll see me in America." During that time, they were at war. It was during wartime, and Dad was, he was just starting to come of age. He was about 16. And Sicily, they went to the Merchant Marines, and he started traveling all over the world, and it brought him to Boston, Mass. And in Boston, he got off the boat, and he started hearing his foreign tongue spoken through the North End. And he felt at home, immediately felt at home. He was took under his wing, and he started fishing and sharing his generational knowledge with people that were basically pioneering an industry. Understanding that Gloucester's commercial fishing industry used to process over 1 million pounds of fish a day on any given day was a big deal back then, and he was right in the thick of it. So as he came to Boston and he worked his way into the fishing industry, just so happens he get blown into Gloucester one day, and he met my mom, and they started courting. Through that courtship, Dad got picked up. You see, he was here as an illegal alien. He had jumped ship. So Mom married Dad in Charlestown jail. And they deported him anyway. So he got deported, went back to Italy, straightened out his papers, and come back and started a family. Started quite the family. He had 6 children, 5 boys, me being the youngest of 5. I had quite the shoes to fill. I started fishing when I was about 11 years old. On weekends, during any free time from school, I realized that the only real time I got to spend with my dad and quality time was working on the boats and working on the docks, and it's what I really love to do. After a few years working with my dad, he saw something in me that my brothers didn't have. You see, my dad trained all my brothers to be great captains and offshore captains through his ability to see the future in an industry. All 5 of us became what I call blue water captains. We started inshore with hooks on a line in a stream in the river. Before you knew it, we were fishing fixed gear. Before you knew it, we were towing a net across the bottom on George's Banks. And further off, we went to Grand Banks and started fishing for swordfish, 1,800 miles from shore sometimes. That's where we got what I call the doctorate. This is unwritten. This is an unwritten journey into the commercial fishing industry where you get your education on the water. This is the University of George's Banks, is what I call it. What my dad noticed in me was I had the ability to have that patience to be able to train people. And he pointed it out one day, and I took it for what it was worth and started writing everything down. Every lesson that I taught the new generation of kids coming in went into a book. And that book became Extreme Gloucester Fishing. It's essentially a training guide for the next generation of commercial fishermen. It's a 40-module curriculum that covers everything commercial fishing. It's something that this industry needed and has been sitting on the back shelf for a long time. My dad was adamant that all his boys learn commercial fishing first, because he knew that the commercial fishing industry was not just a way to be a fisherman or to harvest. There were several different industries tied to it. You could be a welder, you could be an electrician. You had to be all of these things in order to make it happen. So Dad knew by giving us this knowledge, he was also giving us the knowledge to travel and go outside of what we were doing. Our time in the industry, my brother Dominic was one of the youngest captains to ever sail out of this harbor on the Treesera. And as my dad's family grew, he started buying boats. But unfortunately, as his fleet grew, the policies were changing, ever changing so quickly. So as fast as his family's, as fast as his fleet grew, was as fast as the policy was cutting down on the fleet in Gloucester. Gloucester had 1,800 boats fishing at one time, and we were landing tremendous amounts of fish. There were over 10 processing plants in the city, and every one of them had boats taking out fish every single day. Our collective bargaining chip was the commercial fishing industry, and what came from that was a generation of harvesters that we've never seen before in the likes of America. The American fisherman has been harvesting the ocean for 400 years, and for 400 years we've collected generational knowledge. And our communal generational knowledge is what I share in my program. My dad created 5 Gloucestermen, and by him giving me that generational knowledge, I intend to create as many as I could possibly can without having to sacrifice my health, because it's not easy. We're not born Gloucestermen. We're molded. We're fixed to, adapt to heavy seas, nasty weather, and continue to work. Seasickness. It's as simple as that. Some people can't even stand on deck. So with that came the teaching of the next generation of fishermen through our years of being in it. My older brothers, all their friends fished. And in the end, I was the one. I was the kid. Sure, I was the little guy, right? So everything I did was let the kid do it. Nowadays, it's what can we do for the kid, right? So that was Dad's dream. Dad's American dream was to create 5 good fishermen, and from them fishermen to create as many Gloucestermen as possible, and that's what I think he did. Dad achieved what he was out for, and having to have that sense of pride and in the American dream, and his favorite saying was, "God bless America." And I can still hear him. I just lost him a couple weeks ago, so I can still hear him yelling that on the dock. God bless America, so everybody could hear it. Because coming from his humble beginnings and creating what he did was quite the feat. So, God bless you, Dad.
Okay, the next storyteller is an adventurous person, or maybe he's not an adventurous person, or maybe he is. I don't know, but I know he's a great writer, storyteller, and friend. Matt Buchman.
Well, I have slightly different memories of starting out in this area. My first memory is my dad used to rent a little day sailor out of Marblehead. And I remember hanging onto the gunnel. It was this high, and so was I, and looking out at the waves. And I didn't think that we were standing still and the world was spinning beneath us. I could feel us moving forward. But it seemed like those waves could go anywhere. And that caught my imagination at 4. And so I would lie in bed at night and I'd look up at the ceiling and I'd look at how the street lights and the shadows from the windows were creating continents, and the round light fixture in the middle was Antarctica. And my grandfather and I would sail all over the ceiling of my bedroom. But he died when I was 8, and so that dream kind of faded away. When I got out of college, I was in Maine, and I said, I tossed a coin and I went, I'm going to Seattle. And all my friends were like, you're doing what? And they thought it was so brave and so adventurous. The point was, my dad had worked for IBM all these years. IBM stands for I've been moved. So it was just another move, or so I thought, until I landed and then had to figure out what I was doing. But That's a different story. But I made friends, I got jobs, and I made a friend who had a 56-foot bug-eye catch. That's 2 masts, kicked back like they hit a bridge. And he gave me some sailing lessons, and that dream came back of sailing and living on a big boat. You know something about big boats? They're expensive. For 6 months, I was searching for boats, and not a chance. And right near the end of that search, there was this little 2-line ad in the newspaper that said, 50-foot catch, needs work. Yeah, okay, I'm naive. What can I say? A tenth the price of any other boat. I replaced the decking, a third of the interior, the electrical system, the rope rigging, the sails, snapped off the bowsprit, replaced that. But what I learned in the years I spent rebuilding that boat was that she was not a deep sea craft and that I was not an adventurous person. So I let her go and I got into corporate, right? Corporate I could understand. My dad had been corporate. I know how corporate works. And I climbed that ladder. I spent 10 years hustling up that ladder and burned out as spectacularly as you can imagine. Lost everything. I mean, it blew up in my face. I lost the job, the career, the business, my reputation because of a business partner who had a different definition of the word integrity. It was all gone. And I was about to lose the house. In the midst of this working 80 to 100 hours a week while climbing the corporate ladder for a decade, I'd bought a house that was in no better shape than that boat. You think I would have learned? No. I pushed the south wall out 10 feet. I added a second story, doing almost all the work myself. And I was doing it for a family that I never had time to find. Why? Because I was working 80 to 100 hours a week and renovating the house on top of that. So if I let go of the house, if I couldn't imagine going back to work, I couldn't face it. So it's like, if I let go of the house, well, I'm having a midlife crisis. I might as well do it on wheels. So I sold everything and I got on my bicycle and I set off. No real plan. I rode Seattle to LA as a warm-up because the bike shops, they spoke English. That was useful because when I got to Japan, they didn't. Then I rode across the Australian outback, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Up through Indonesia. You got to watch out for the little kids in Indonesia. They all yell. You hear them yell, Mister, pencil, pencil. And what they'll do is they'll come up in a mob and they will strip your gear. They don't steal anything except the pencils. They want them to do their homework. I went through India and I did not go to the sex and drugs rave up above Hampi Temple. Went through Israel, Greece, Eastern Europe, and across to France. And there's this thing in cycling called kicking the pedal high. When you kick the pedal high, it's right before you stomp down. And when your bike and your life weighs about 120 pounds, you have to kick hard. But it's a chance to think about the choices you've made and a chance to think about the choices you're going to make in the future. So I got back and I started out in very low-level corporate. I let go of all that nonsense. And this time I found the family before I designed and built the next house. Right? I do learn. And along the way, I married, fell in love with a single mom, got the kid prepackaged at 6. About the time she got to college, I got laid off at the bottom of the recession twice. So suddenly, we're bleeding money out of every pore. We're about to lose the house again. And my wife said, well, you know those novels? And what had happened was way back in Japan, I had started writing my first novel, my first piece of fiction, totally by accident. And I sold it to this tiny house that had the decency to go out of business almost immediately afterward. And my novels were finally to the point where they were just starting to bubble and they were just starting to come up. And so we made the bet. And we sold everything. We dumped the house at the bottom of the housing recession. We moved into this pit on the Oregon coast that was worse than the first house or the sailboat. And I wrote my ass off. That was 13 years and 3 days ago. I've been a full-time writer ever since. Retired my wife about 8 years ago to be my part-time assistant. And I'm about to lose my place because my life is changing right now. We're betting our savings again. We're betting a big chunk that I can lane change my career. As of a book launch that's coming in 3 days, I'm letting go of every one of my series that's making money, and I'm betting that I can create a new series that starts in Antarctica. It's a climatological thriller series. The catch is, I've never been to Antarctica. Well, in 3 weeks, I'm going to be flying to Ushuaia, Argentina, getting on a 186-foot square-rigged tall ship, and I'm going to be working crew sailing to the Antarctic Peninsula from Argentina and spending 3 weeks learning about Antarctica and sailing big ships. And my wife knows not to worry because she knows that though adventures happen to me, I'm really not an adventurous person. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I want to say this now because I know I'll forget at the very end, but Matt bought a ton of these free short story books from his best-selling series. You can pick them up on the way out, and hopefully you'll be a new fan of Matt. He forgot to mention that he's written over 70 novels at this point. Yeah, I'm still working on my first, but that's only 69 more than me. So our final storyteller is Cape Ann's own Jimmy T. Tarantino. And you folks know he's a rather timid soul, but, but he's hard not to like, and believe me, I've tried. Please welcome Jimmy Tarantino.
There's a great quote that begins, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things that you haven't done than the things that you have done. So throw off the bow lines and sail out of the safe harbor. Clearly, these speakers here tonight, you don't have any problem throwing off the bow lines. Personally, I started throwing off the bow lines when I was a little kid in a fish box off Pavilion Beach, pretending I was winning Sunday's sailboat race in St. Peter's Fiesta. I can still hear my mom, "Jimmy, get in here right now! Get back here, you're over your head!" Well, I've been blessed to be surrounded by a lot of great rowers and a lot of great people through my 64 years, and I've won my share of sailboat races. I've been fortunate enough to be in the international dory races, won a couple of those. And you may have heard, I recently rowed a Grand Bank story from Gloucester, Mass. To Lunenburg, Nova Scotia this past summer. So I've seen my share of weather and deep water, but I also very, very proud of, I spent the most miserable / best winter of my life at University of Georges Banks aboard a Sanfilippo boat, fishing hooks on Georges Banks. And that's, let me tell you, 14 days at sea, home for 2, 12 days back out on the ocean. Georges Banks, you get the perfect storm, guys. Saw a lot of nasty stuff. What's the name of that show of the guys that fish crabs in Alaska? What's the name of that show? Yeah, The Deadliest Catch. They got nothing on Georges Banks. I remember green water coming over the bow. So I've seen my share of weather. And recently just got the opportunity. A good friend of mine asked if I'd like to sail with him from Gloucester to Bermuda, and then on to Puerto Rico in a 64 luxury sailboat. Wow, I'm a Gloucester fisherman. I seen it all. A nice pleasure cruise sounded pretty good to me. Sign me up. So our story begins 2 days after Thanksgiving aboard the vessel Artemis. There's a crew member here in the audience tonight. 2 days after Thanksgiving, we set sail out of Gloucester. The forecast was going to be a little sloppy, but once we got through, what's the name of the big current? I'm drawing a blank here. Thank you. Once we got through the Gulf Stream, everything would be fine, clear sailing all the way to Puerto Rico. So we leave Gloucester, it's blowing 10 or 15, nothing for a Gloucester fisherman, right? I'm excited to go on this big trip, and about 6 hours later, it's picking up 15 to 20, and I get that little queasy feeling. Now, I've never been seasick in my life. I've fished many, many years, been blue water sailing. I always, when you first go out, you get that little queasy feeling for the first day or two, and then you get your sea legs and you're solid. So I wasn't worried about it. And the next day, the wind comes up 25, 30, and the seas are getting a little big, 6, 8. The queasy feeling's not going away. I'm like, wait, I've never been seasick. What is this? Then we come into the Gulf Stream, and there's a strange phenomena that occurs when a current is going one way and the winds are going this way. Now the winds are 25, 30 miles an hour, and it's called, the captain explained to me, it's a confused sea. So I was a little confused as the seas got bigger, and it's confused. The current's fighting the wind, and the waves get huge, and they get steep, and they come from all directions, something I had never experienced. So the queasiness starts to grow up into here. And how many of you have ever been seasick? It is not a pleasant feeling. And I was inexperienced. This great Gloucester fisherman all of a sudden starts heading for the rail. And I'm nervous as hell because I've sailed with this captain before and he likes to keep his boat clean. So we have these safety vests where we can clip in so we don't get washed overboard in this kind of weather. And in this kind of weather, when it's blowing 30, the boat's all over the place. You're all over. You can't even walk across the boat without holding onto something. And when you leave the cockpit and go out on deck, you got to stay low. So I'm crawling on all fours over to the rail, and I'm very cautious about not getting hurt. I'm clipped in anyway, but I wrap myself in the stanchions and the stays, and I proceed to get sick over the rail. But the fortunate thing is there's plenty of water coming on board, so with every vomit, I got my face washed. Like, what did I sign up for? Well, I climbed back in and I feel a little bit better, but that didn't last long. The wind continued to come up and the seas continued to rise. And that night, it got so bad, it was pitch black, and that's even worse for seasickness because if you can't see the horizon, you're doomed. I'm back on all fours, crawling back out again. Never been seasick in my life, and I'm horrified here over the rail because I don't like being useless to the crew. So it kind of reminded me, it was so pitch black and the boat moving around. Did you ever have one of those magic 8 balls when you were a kid? It was like being in a magic 8 ball with a bratty 8-year-old going. Literally all over the place. Horrifying. So that night, things continued to get worse. And when I came on my watch, it was my watch, and they said the wind just came over 40 miles an hour. And the seas are getting worse. The wind continued to come up. I actually saw 50-mile-an-hour winds on the raid. It was horrifying. I got out and got seasick. There was nothing left to get sick with. So Poseidon's trying to wring you out, trying to find any kind of liquid he can get out of you, coming out of your ears and eyes. It's not a pretty sight. I crawled back in, and things continued to get worse. I looked down the companionway, and there's water coming up through the floorboards. We're out 500 miles from anywhere, and I'm thinking, shit, we're in trouble. And I'm seasick, I can't even think straight. Fortunately, the captain and his brother could think straight, and they said, get the floorboards up. I don't know what's going on, I'm just confused and scared. And they get the floorboards up, and the captain tells his brother, taste it. He sticks his face down, and he comes up, it's fresh. So finally it dawned on me, we weren't taking on water. A huge relief came on. Apparently the new water making system, it's a pressure fed thing, had blew a hose and all this commotion and slamming. So they immediately, the captain and Chris, who's in the audience tonight, got the pumps going, got the water cleared out, and we survived through the storm. Meanwhile, I'm up there with the magic 8-ball. Are we gonna die? Concentrate and ask again. Concentrate? I gotta go throw up. Well, we came through the storm, obviously. We're here today, and the weather come down a little bit, and we sailed into Bermuda halfway through our 1,500-mile journey. And if you ever want to go someplace that's going to heal your soul, go to St. George's in Bermuda during the first day of Advent. They have a thing called Walkabout. All of Bermuda shuts down and comes into St. George's to see this beautiful event. They close up all the streets, and there's singers and dances and choirs that sings like angels in the churches. And having come through this ordeal, we were all so proud of ourselves that we survived. And our boat, Artemis, was well known and renowned. People were coming up in the docks and saying, you could tell that they wished they had a boat like ours, because they had also limped into Bermuda with broken masts, broken bones, and they saw we came in pretty unscathed. We blew out a clew grommet on the mizzen sail, and one of our guys got tossed out of the bunk, was pretty bruised up, but overall we were pretty good, and we healed there in St. George's in Bermuda. We had 3 or 4 days to make repairs, and the captain assured us beautiful sailing all the way to the Caribbean as we crossed the Sargasso Seas. So we're feeling pretty good. Oh, one more thing, in St. George's, go over the hill and go to Tobacco Bay and swim in that healing water there. It's magnificent, and we were so fortunate to spend 3 or 4 days there. So we got to leave, and we're heading clear sailing. The captain assures us beautiful weather. He's paid a professional forecast service to get the forecast, and we know we're good. So we head out of Bermuda, heading south. And guess what shape is south of Bermuda, between Bermuda? Anybody? Yeah. I swear on my grandmother's soul, you cannot make this shit up. We're one day out of Bermuda, beautiful weather, and all of a sudden, a little bird comes flying over the boat. I can see a little, I go, look, a bird. And me being an experienced Gloucester fisherman, I've seen this a bunch of times. Anybody who's done blue water sailing, occasionally these songbirds get blown offshore, and they can only fly for so long. They'll perish if they don't find something to land on. So you end up having a pet bird for a week or two until they see land and they fly away. And I quickly explained this to the crew that we were in the crew, but this little, and I remember him clearly, was a green and yellow bird, came flying in the pilot house under each of our noses and flew off. I go, oh, he's gonna land. And he goes, shh. He didn't land. This little Bermuda Triangle harbinger, was he giving us a message? I'm like, oh no, please. The wind starts coming up. The wind comes up. Within 6 to 12 hours, I'm crawling back out to the rail. Why? What happened to the good weather? Magic 8-ball, what are you doing? Went through the whole sickness thing again for a couple of days. It was horrible. Unforecast. Apparently, nobody got the forecast. But we come through it again, and we came in, and once the weather came down, sailing across the Sargasso Seas, I saw some of the most beautiful sunsets and skies, and I know God blessed us to make us through some of the hardships that we had, and I'm glad I threw off those bow lines to make that trip, because when we came in, we were bound for Culebra in Puerto Rico, a little island east, and we had St. Thomas on this side in Puerto Rico, and there's amazing, beautiful skies, and it was a tremendous experience. But I think I might be done blue water sailing. I have a plan with my wife we're taking, my dory is called the Heart of Gloucester. We're putting it in the Everglades in April, and we're gonna sail through the alligators and pythons, across Florida Bay, and out the Keys. It's only 8 feet of water. I can't help throw off the bow lines, but I think I'm gonna stick a little closer to the safe harbors.
Thank you guys so much. You are the heroes for coming out tonight and supporting the Gloucester Writers Center. Thank you and have a great night.
Big things to break down fast and nothing to last. Americone baloney, Americone baloney, Americone baloney, Americone baloney. Big things to break down fast.